What up, everybody? Big D coming at you from the 505 Patio Lounge today. Way too hot to be inside the regular summer lounge, as we would be melting. The faces just melt right off. It's so hot in there. Been over 100 degrees out here for the last couple weeks, and it's just unbearable. But welcome back from summer break. That month off was beautiful. Got a great show tonight. Got one of my longtime friends in the community coming on. This will be his third time coming on the show. Got to bring him back once a year. But before we bring on the guest tonight, I want to remind you all, click the link tree that's down in the description or pinned into the chat there, and go support my advertisers, sponsors, and preferred retail partners. They help continue to keep all the programming going on the show, and your support will go a long way. Take advantage of those exclusive promo codes only available to my viewers out there to save yourself some coinage. I know, hey, I like saving money. You like saving money. And because I'm a man of the people, I am here to help you save some coinage. So whether you're looking for sticks or accessories, you know, I got you covered. I'm here for you. So go take advantage of all of those and go get yourself something delicious, or go get yourself that new lighter that you've been eyeballing for a while. All right, so my guest tonight, man, he creates fantastic content over here on YouTube. He is kind of the resident historian for the cigar community. He does a lot of long-formed, informative shows, digging into the history of brands, histories of tobacco, and overall history within the tobacco and cigar culture out there. This is what I like to call one of those me shows. This is a show for me. Him and I are probably going to nerd out over blends, over cigars, over brands, because that's what we do when we get together. And I'm happy to have him back for the third year in a row. So without further ado, we got Mr. Jose Rivera from BackYard Cigars. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Daniel, glad to be here. Glad to be here. And
Glad to see you, man. Glad to have you back.
I just want to introduce myself to those who haven't been familiar with my content. I've been doing this for a couple years in regards to cigar history on YouTube, a little bit of content on Instagram as well. So I'm Jose at BackYard Cigars. BackYard Cigars being something that I just came up with because a little bit before the pandemic, I just started smoking outdoors more, just connecting with nature and things like that, and enjoying my time in the backyard. And then I just said, look, I'm a big history buff, and I love to talk about history in general. Cigar has a deep, rich history. Let me delve into it. Let me find those little particular things that are either repeating themselves throughout the decades, or are things that maybe some people might think, well, this is something new, when in fact people were arguing about it during the 1880s. So yeah, I find interesting content like that, and try to share it with the viewers and let them know, hey, you think you're going through something now? Well, look at what these individuals had to go through at this point in time in cigar history.
Yes, and it's fantastic. You put in so much time and research in what you do, and I find myself getting lost watching or listening to the videos. For a lot of it, I've sometimes got very long drives, and I just put it on. It's like, oh well, this is an hour and a half of Jose just talking. I sit there and I listen to it as I'm driving. I totally nerd out because it's like I didn't know that, and a lot of facts that you bring forth in your content, in your shows that you do. When I go to trade shows or when I'm talking with brand owners, I regurgitate a lot of that back to them. I'm like, oh, well, you're from there. Did you know about this or this or this? Or have you ever thought about using this and within your filler, because your blend consists of this, because this is going to do this and this, and all because I heard you talk about it. And it's stuck in my brain.
Yeah, it's a lot of non-cigar smoking people, when they think of tobacco, they think of Cuban tobacco, and that's good. I get it. But in regards to some of the videos that you may be listening to, it a lot of it is American history, right? It's that the American cigar history. You get a little bit of Cuba weaved in because of there are international ties, international events and things like that, especially with Spain's monopoly early on of the Cuban cigar industry, and they kind of, as much as people say, well, they were in love with Cuban cigars in that time period, they were in love with whatever the Spanish monopoly was offering, because they kept a lot of the good stuff for themselves. But as time went by, people had to get creative with their blends, and it wasn't just about the Cuban puro. It was about what else can we do, and I think the United States was a perfect industry for that, because while they had the Connecticut broadleaf and the Connecticut shade came a little later on, and they had growing fields in Florida and Georgia and Ohio, and they had decent tobacco, right? Their best was in Connecticut and Pennsylvania, and Ohio, of course, for a short period of time. But they had to decide how we're gonna, the whole invention of the clear Havana, using a Sumatran wrapper, using a Cuban binder, Cuban filler with mix of Puerto Rican, that type of ingenuity at that time was unheard of. And when you go looking at that and you see how it's developed into today's age, where you see some cigars, 5 nations, tobacco from 5 different nations, if not more. And it just gets really interesting how our palate begins to receive all of that. And we begin to kind of, there was a time no one wanted to smoke Mexican tobacco, right? Mexican tobacco was crude. Those type of things were said about Mexican tobacco way back in the 1880s, even if famous people smoked Mexican tobacco because it was strong. But now, Mexican San Andres, for Mexican Negro, for the binders, and you've even got Casa Turent, right, using some for the filler. And things have changed.
And they have really, the one thing that noticed in with now wrappers has been the reintroduction of the Mexican Sumatra to out there to blends, especially from Casa Turrent and Casa 1910, the two prevalent ones out there that take it, but they've taken what was considered junk filler and have really kind of turned it into a top quality wrapper leaf.
Yeah. It's things are going to progress as time goes by, and you're going to see a whole lot of different blends. You're a boutique guy specialist, and I think boutique blends are pretty good with this as well. I think is Unkind, that's the brand, right? Unkind, the one with the birds.
Oh no, that's oh my goodness, that's Blackbird.
Blackbird. Yes. They have a cigar named Unkind.
Unkind, yes.
You look at them, they're sort of boutique, right? At least they probably were at some point. Maybe you be the judge. And they have a lot of funky blends and really interesting cigars where they're using different tobaccos that you don't normally see and that you don't normally try.
Yeah, and you're seeing a big shift now with a lot of the brands that specialize like in Brazilian Cubre, because they can't get Cubre anymore. Like I do work with Family by Loyalty, and one of their biggest sellers has a Cubre wrapper, and really it's come down to kind of doing a reimagining of the blending, trying with a different wrapper on it, and the dynamic that has completely changed with taking out that Cubre wrapper completely changes the entire dynamic of the cigar. But you've seen that, and we've seen this for the last 4 years. There was the amount of San Andreas that people want and the Turrents just couldn't keep it in stock and grow. So what'd you see? You saw that move take that San Andreas seed to Ecuador, and now so now you're getting Mexican Ecuadorian San Andreas, to meet that demand. Same thing with the Connecticut broadleaf, both Connecticut and the Pennsylvania broadleaf. The demand oversees that, and so now you've seen that shift to moving that to Honduras, and putting out with the Honduran Connecticut and the Honduran Pennsylvanian just to meet those demands.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I like the initiative that they've taken in it, but there's the soil conditions are so much different that I can taste the difference. I don't know about how your casual smoker, probably not so much, but I can taste the difference in the tobacco just because it's just because of where it's grown. I'm like, nah, this is too rich, too earthy, and you're not going to get that out of Connecticut. So that's kind of one of those tip-offs.
Yeah, I mean, they try and try, right? But sometimes I think like Yogi Berra, where he said he used to say, if you can't imitate him, don't copy him. So I think sometimes it works out. You have the Ecuadorian version of the Connecticut shade, right? Some people swear it's better than the regular Connecticut shade, but you can't tell that to a Connecticut farmer because he'll tell you right away the differences in what make Connecticut shade superior. What we know is that it's more expensive, right? We know that. We know it's more expensive by the pound, and when people can save $1 or $2 and use Ecuadorian shade, which is it's really good. There's nothing offensive to me about Ecuadorian Connecticut tobacco wrappers, but everybody has a different taste, and some people are loyal to certain types of cigars and types of tobacco.
Yeah, I agree. I should have brought the pure African out and smoked that one tonight, but I didn't.
African, there's been a movement to get some African cigars out in the market. A few years back, Bongani tried, and
well,
I don't know.
So Ish with Banff went ahead and developed 2 factories in Africa, one in Zimbabwe and one in Ethiopia. One to meet his demand for his European market out there, but also 2 to start up the farming. And you have the pure African, which has it's 100% pure African tobacco from multiple African nations in it.
Wow. Is it short filler, long filler?
It's all long filler, buddy.
Long filler?
It is pure. It is a knock you on your ass cigar. It is. It has got very strong vitamin N to it, but it tastes so good. You find yourself fast smoking it, and then you stand up and you're like, whoa, okay. Okay.
So African tobacco's got its own twang, I feel, whenever I've smoked it. And I'm not just talking about like the Cameroon stuff, which is what most cigar smokers are used to when we say African tobacco, right?
Well, you have to but now you've got to justify that with there's a difference between Cameroon and Marifel Cameroon.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because that has to be justified. Because if I tell you it's Cameroon, okay, but there's a certain status that comes with saying that you're using Marifel Cameroon.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you on that, because the quality of their tobacco is on another level, as we both know. And, a lot of cigar makers do what clothing makers do with the name cashmere, right? They'll put it on the label, but if you look closely, you see that it's only a small percentage of cashmere or an inferior grade of cashmere, and they're charging that. And then you've got the Marifels, which are the Fifth Avenue brand, and they're gonna, they got the quality behind it. You're gonna see a $20, $25, $30, $35 stick, if not more, in some cases. When they release their line, I think their cigars are going for about $40.
It all depends.
The Marifels.
It all depends on which one you get. So I
Do you
do
like the
have.
earnest?
So I do have one of the Marifel sticks that also one, it is the Marifel Cameroon in it. It also has the Dominican Cameroon in it, which are Marifel seeds grown in on Fuente's farm.
Okay.
Also it has Cuban filler in it.
All right.
Now I have one. I haven't smoked it yet, but
Cuban filler.
Cuban filler.
Interesting. Interesting.
Now I have
See,
it. I haven't smoked it. Now
yeah.
this
But
is a
just the
this is
specs
a
alone,
it it is a $90 cigar,
I would expect.
and I have it, and I stare at it. And I go, I really want to try it, but I don't know. And then I was gifted one of the Oscuros from Marifel. So it has the Oscuro Cameroon leaf on it.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that thing is so dark and oily, and it looks so delicious. Oh, it looks good.
I I gotta say that African tobacco is another tobacco that's considered expensive, right? I mean, at least the Cameroon, and especially the kind that Marifal gets, and I
Well,
get
yeah,
that a lot. Yeah,
it is very pricey on the open. It is pricey out there. That's why not a lot of people they just go with regular Cameroon because if you can drop $35 a pound on tobacco, that's a lot
it is.
to spend. But you're getting that. Look, it is the Bugatti of African tobacco out there. That's why
Yes, it is.
it's one of those you always got to look. If it says I've learned this reading descriptions when I've gone into seeing about the blends. When it says San Andreas,
Yeah.
that means it's Ecuadorian.
Okay.
If it says Mexican San Andreas, then that
Yes.
is the Veracruz turret family San Andreas.
Yeah,
But
I've noticed that too.
If it says just is San Andreas, okay, it's not Mexican. That's Ecuadorian on there.
Now, and this just came to my mind right now. Like, for many years, I think you've heard the rumor that a lot of people have passed around that Padron was actually sourcing Mexican San Andres and using it and passing it off as Nicaraguan. And a lot of, high level industry people have mentioned it offhand, don't want to be quoted for it. And what's your take on that?
I'm not going to tell you that I know it's true, but I'm going to tell you that some very reliable sources that I trust have verified that it is not a Nicaraguan puro, and the 1926 anniversarios are not Nicaraguan puros. That is a San Andreas wrapper on the Maduro.
Now that's exactly the conclusion that I arrived at, right? Years ago. But it just kind of, I mean, Jorge's in charge now. Jose Padron is, I don't know if it was happening under his guidance, or if this was just something that they didn't want to reveal that they were using Mexican tobacco, the same way that CAO didn't want to name their cigar Brazilla because of the preconceived notions that people had about Brazilian tobacco at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like we mentioned before, people have had that same idea about Mexican tobacco not being up to par, and yet, as we've seen, they produce some fine tobacco specifically for wrappers, right? So I don't know why they wouldn't admit it and just come out and say it. I mean,
I don't know, and I don't know if the 26. I've smoked the 26s for about the 1926 anniversarios for about 20 years. I can
Yeah.
say that I not really noticed a change in the taste or the blend. So
Okay.
either this is something that was a change that was made prior to me smoking the 26s,
Could
or
be. Yeah.
or they're just their blenders are just that damn good that they're able to take that they're able to take that San Andreas wrapper and pass it off as a Criollo Maduro wrapper.
Yeah, because if we don't know at what stage of the curing or the fermentation process or whatever they're buying that tobacco at, right? So if they're buying it at a point where they can add some finishing touches to it or add some of their own little, juju magic, then they can probably alter it to fit the profile in the way they feel best, right? I'm just saying because you can buy the tobacco already ready to go, ready to
Yeah,
roll, or you can buy it a little, before it's time and do some of your own work to it. So I don't know. I'm always curious. There's been a few times that I've smoked a few Padrones, 1926s, I forget, and I felt like the wrapper tasted a little Honduran to me. That's just me. Maybe it could just have just been me, but there was a certain similarity to a Honduran. And I just thought to myself, well, if 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 it is what it is, then just come out and say it. But who knows why certain cigar makers are so secretive?
I don't know, but this same person that I trust did tell me that 70% of the San Andreas the turrets produce is already sold to Padron, which means that the rest of it, the 30%, is out on the open market.
Now, I'm aware that Padron also sells cigars on the Canary Islands. I mean, they're stretching it. Could it be that they're using the Mexican on San Andres because they've expanded or they've been in the Canary Islands for quite some time? I don't think they pumped that many cigars into the Canary Islands, but I'd
And
be
I don't
interested to
know.
try one.
It's and I guess road trip.
Well, yeah, the Canary Islands. You can find some decent Cuban cigars out there. I've heard, and Padron has a kiosk out there as well, or
You
several.
know, yeah. I think I look. I'm interested now. I can't. I can only go for people who I trust, who I know that if they're saying it, I kind of take it as word
Yeah,
on that. But yeah, look, but look, Padron makes probably some of the best cigars that you will ever smoke in your life, and
yeah,
that's my personal opinion on that. And I know that look, in today's age, when you say that, you that's you're either a Padron person or a Fuente person, but you're not both. You have to pick. You have to pick one. And if you say Padron is your favorite cigar over Fuente, then people get ready to throw. People get ready to put up knuckles.
they'll start talking about all the Fuente classics and all of the wonderful things that Fuente has done for the cigar industry. And you can you can look at it in both directions. Both
You
both of these
can,
guys
and
are legends.
but I think that the fact that they came together with a collaboration stick just goes to show you could like both.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Now granted, I will never get my hands on one because it's $200 for one stick. You know, I'm not willing to pay that much.
I'm not either. As I thought about it at one point. And then I just kind of said, that's a lot for one stick. You know.
That's right. Now, if they were $100 each,
Yeah.
I would totally spend $200 to try one of each.
Yes.
But $200 for one, that's outrageous.
And I
But
think yeah.
but look, you know, 100% of the proceeds go to charity. So neither Carlito or George is taking taking any profit as Jose,
No, sorry.
as Jose drops his cigar.
Yeah, the camera. But yeah, you're right. It goes to charity. That's all great. You know, we've already talked about how they fumbled that rollout and everything. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I do. I want to know, how does Charlie Manolo break every cigar story ever?
you know, my
I want to
theories on
know.
that.
I want to know how that. Like seriously, like he broke the story and he got it wrong when he broke the story, like he does with most things uh,
Yeah,
out there. But I want to know how this guy, every story that breaks, is like, how does this guy break every? How is the dude's like a ninja?
I think. Yeah, I think his contacts run deep. I think he gets the phone calls, and I think he may do some follow up on it and find out, you know, what's what. And you're gonna get some wrong when you're trying to rush out the gate like that. Sometimes, cigar aficionado, they don't seem to break any story, right? Like they just, they're a monthly publication. They provide classic entertainment for classic cigar lovers, and you, I don't know if they've been covering that much on what's been happening with the new age of boutique cigars and things of that nature. But you know, Charlie's all over the place. You
Of
know, he
course he is.
is.
I'm sad he doesn't do reviews anymore because I enjoyed his reviews.
They were quite interesting.
They were the Antarctic cinnamon is just divine on the palate.
Yeah,
Oh, I can taste the rendering of clubbed baby seal fat. You can really taste the fear of that seal coming through. Oh,
but my favorite, what he described? He said, almost like a burning rubber tire. It's like, whoa, I don't want that cigar. Tastes like in the finish, I get a little bit of burning rubber tire or something like that.
man.
It's like, yeah, that's not a cigar I want, but yeah.
Oh, the
But
pungent smell of 25-pound elephant dung balls used by the Zavatsu tribe in the in their wine fields for manure. It's there, the pungentiness. It just tickles my nostrils. I mean, shut up, bro. You're the only guy I know that breaks down, that knows every region of cinnamon bark.
yeah, no, I mean, you know, it's entertaining to read them for sure. I like, my favorite used to be, I say used to because I still catch up on him, but Catman. I don't know.
Is he still
I,
doing it?
I I don't. So the rumors are that he's not, and he's got some kind of ghost writer, kind of
Hmm.
emulating his style, and then he'll add copy and paste some of his past stories from the music industry. But I mean, 10 years ago, I was reading his stuff. I would just roll over laughing with some of the things that he would say, and he was always on point, mind you. I rarely found him to be off. He wasn't one of these guys that described a whole lot of crazy things, but he gave you some good funny descriptions about certain things. He was just a funny guy. Wherever he's at, bless him.
Was so when you go, what your process for when you go? I'm going to do a long form history lesson here. What kind
Mhm.
of motivates you on this? Is it something that you smoke? Something that you read? Is it something that you hear? What motivates you to go? I want to dig into this deeper.
So it's a little bit of all of those things. Sometimes it's a question that pops up into my head, and that question leads me to wonder how was this um, how was this talked about, or in years past. Other times it's I've been given a very old cigar, a cigar that I'm familiar with, but only in a historical way, not that I've ever smoked it, right? And then that will intrigue me into looking into the cigar. Other times it's the tobacco in the cigar. If it's a particular blend, and it has some kind of historical significance. Certain cigars, in particular, pay homage to past great Cuban cigars, and other cigars use advertising that is purely American. You know what I mean? And it takes you back to those 1920s time. And so all of those things kind of give me ideas as to what I've got to like look into in terms of history. And I'll do the historical research, and then I've got to vet that research. I've got to look further into it sometimes, and then just kind of like put it in the best way that I can chronologically, so that the viewer is understanding the beginning of this cigar company or this cigar issue and how it developed over time. Sort of like what I did with the retrohale, the history of the retrohale.
Yes.
So, and that was a tough one because they didn't call it the retrohale back then. You know, they just didn't have that name. They came up with other kind of names or phrases to describe someone retrohaling. But you know, everything in cigar history, I think, has its place. And in the 1920s for America, it was a time of advertising, and advertising was king, and just how they did that affected the way you, the cigar smoker, would actually experience cigars. They were molding us, you know,
Yeah.
they were molding, and they still do to this day. They still mold us, as most of, not all of us, but they mold a lot of the cigar community. They did it back then, and it was just, it wasn't with bad intentions. It was with good intentions. I mean, the main purpose has always been to give you the best cigar that you can smoke.
Oh yeah.
So that's a bit of how I go into it, and then I also try to think about the time period. Uh, if it's the 1930s as opposed to the 1960s, the climate, what people were going through, what cigar smokers were going through, you know, and to give a clearer picture of to the viewer of what it was like then in comparison to what it is now.
Would you have liked to have been around in the 20s and 30s to really get that essence of the advertising? Was it true? Did is is this tobacco really the best? Is this really the best binder that's out there? Would you have liked to have been around during that time?
I've thought about that question many times, and as a cigar man, I think there would have been no better time than the 1920s and the 1930s, especially all throughout Prohibition in the United States was still a great time for cigar makers. And I think that as a cigar person, I would have loved it. I would have loved to have been involved in the advertising, uh, just have been a part of the community at that time, which was much larger than the community we have today,
Oh yeah.
but with the same kind of strong ties that we have today. If not deeper, I think the ties ran even deeper uh, because there was just so many different families involved.
Now I
J.C.
so
Newman.
this now if you could go back in time and you go, I'm from the future, and you
Mhm.
talk about it, you could really blow the minds of a lot of people by going, you like smoking that. Those that type of cigar is a beginning cigar that most women start on. In my time, oh,
Mhm.
we have a huge woman culture. You could totally blow their mind on that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you should see the amount of women who are involved in cigars. On the ownership side, on the um, o- ownership side of owning their own brand, to owning their own stores, to just being part of the culture out there. You could really blow the mind on that.
I would, and I don't think a lot of people would have been very happy about hearing that. I'm sorry if anybody's waving or saying hello to me and I don't
Oh
see
yeah,
them.
yeah, no.
I can't see without my glasses on.
It's my work wife, Miss Michelle from
Oh,
Cigars with
okay.
M.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
she
Hello,
is
Michelle.
popping in to say hello there.
So yes, hello to everybody. In case I didn't wave to anyone that may have.
Oh
May have.
yeah, I'm
They all want
taking
to
care
see
of.
you.
I'm waving and taking care of everybody for you. So don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you. I would go back if I could set that DeLorean. I'd set it back to 1928
Oh,
when
right before the
right
Great
before
Depression.
Prohibition, right before the Great Depression, right before Prohibition,
Okay.
and obviously after the war, right, and before the war, before the next war, because I think in 1928 it was the wild, wild west in a lot of ways for the cigar industry in the United States. And in some cases, you could say for the world. I mean, it was just kind of a crazy time with the tariffs and everything. But in 1928, the United States was absorbed in their obsession with the 5-cent cigar. And the 5-cent cigar was what the common man, the working man, was buying, what most men were buying. If you had a cushier job, you bought a 10-cent, 15-cent cigar. If you worked in government, you might be smoking a quarter cigar.
Oh,
And if you were, you know, J.P.
Rock,
Morgans of the world, or
Mr.
Rockefellers,
Rockefeller.
then you were smoking $2, $3 cigars, and that was unheard of. A $2, $3 cigar, but those were usually from Cuba, and they graded them in different gradings. And I think the advertising in 1928, you could get away with saying just about anything. You know how it upsets me to see sometimes some of the advertising that what's the boutique brand Ezra Zion puts out
Okay.
to describe their cigars. As much as that may infuriate me sometimes, it's nothing in comparison to what they were doing in the 1920s. Now, they were being respectable gentlemen for the most part, but they were making the same outlandish claims. Smoke our cigars, it'll cure your asthma. Smoke our cigars, it'll calm your nerves. Smoke our cigars if you have this affliction or that affliction. And so it was just, a time period where you could get away with a lot. And it was just, people were being very adventurous, to say the least.
Where do you think that the real change came with cigars to that where we're at now, more of that modern cigar? Where did that change to you? You think that occurred?
I mean, a lot of experts and historians alike will point towards the embargo. And they will say that that's when the real change came. Uh, 62, but it actually took several more years for that to really uh, develop
Well,
into what
I mean,
the
you
modern
had all
cigar.
those Cuban families that had to escape that came to
Hmm.
America, went to the Dominican, went to Nicaragua, all during that time, but having to set up shop and all that. So there really was a lull in what
Yeah,
was readily available because that it was like mm, we're losing this, but
yeah,
those families still aren't here where
yeah,
they should be
yeah,
yet.
yeah. I mean, there was that concern with a lot of the Cuban legacy families of establishing their place, right? And the pecking order of things, and what they felt that they were entitled to as cigar makers. And they did it for the love of cigar making, but they also have to earn a living, right? And I think that real change really came about. The modern cigar, like the one that we're smoking nowadays, probably in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, one would say also, well, duh, that's when the boom happened, right? 92, 91. But I think that, in the 80s, 85, 86, there was some ongoing experimentation with, fertilizers and different soils and things of that nature that were already being accumulated. That information was being accumulated to craft what would eventually be that Padron 2000, Padron
Yeah.
3000. And because when Padron was starting out in Miami in his little shop, he was experimenting like a, you know, I mean, he was going. He said he was buying Puerto Rican tobacco. He was buying Honduran, Nicaragua, whatever he could get his hands on. But Nicaraguan was actually a little later when they actually flew him out there to take a look at their fields. But he was rolling what he called fumas, and they were Connecticut broadleaf wrapped puros, I believe. And then he had some other ones with Connecticut wrappers and Puerto Rican filler. And he was doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but people liked the fumas because it said it had the rustic appeal of a Cuban cigar, and that was his big hit before introducing the Thousand series. And so you look at that. I mean, that
And I'm a
evolution.
huge fan of the 1000 series.
Yeah,
You know that they're, you know, that was the first cigar I ever smoked was a 2000 natural. That was the very first one that I ever had.
that's I call it the Eddie Murphy stick because in Trading Places, if you, I'm sure you've seen the movie Trading
Mhm.
Places, when they tell him this is all yours, and he's trying to steal everything, and they're like, no, that's yours. And he goes into the humidor and he grabs all of these cigars and he puts them all over, and they're like, they're yours. And he gets into the limo and they're falling out, and you see the Padron sign, the label on them, and I'm like, there he was. And that was the 80s. Was it? I believe it was the 80s. Yeah, 86, I think.
Mhm.
So
Was,
yeah,
you know, and I had last year I had Rafael Cifuentes on, and his family owned Partagas in Cuba before the revolution took place,
I watched that. Yeah,
and he got in depth on you know his the tough choice his family had to make to bolt Cuba to Spain and
yeah,
really just kind of you know leave it all behind. But the one thing that his grandfather took with him was all the recipe book. So the Cuban government did their best, but like you said, you know his stick that he has out there, the Azales Reales, that is that is the original Series D.
yeah.
You know, that was reminiscent of the original Series D. He got it as close as it could be made that they could do there at El Titan de Bronze in Miami, to creating that with New World tobacco.
It's exceptional. It's an
It's a
exceptional
fantastic
cigar.
cigar. It's so
It
good.
really is. It is so good. I've been. So as soon as I finished the first one, I went to get a fiver, and I realized it was sold out everywhere, and for good reason. Because it's I think it's a $14, $15 stick, but it tastes like a much more expensive cigar, and it's very Cubanesque.
Oh
Very,
yeah, and
very.
it's such a good stick, and it makes you wonder about those original Partagas sticks. You know what you have now from them. What were they really like originally? If what you're, you know, with him saying, I still, you know, he has the original recipe books to all of that, and his goal and hope is one day is to that the embargo gets lifted and he can take back the family business
You know,
and go back to manufacturing like the original blend of all of the
that would be
Partagas sticks.
ideal. That's far away in the future. I
It
think,
is.
I really think the more I read on the potential for that to happen, the more I read about how it can. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Some political, you know,
The fact
you know how
China
that is.
owns most of Habanos.
There's a lot. Yeah, that's one problem.
That's
That's
what
one issue.
that's one
That's one
issue.
issue. Yeah. There's more issues, but hey, if it could happen one day, I mean, there's people out there that are getting their hands on small amounts of Cuban tobacco, and they're blending it with other tobaccos. That's already setting the groundwork for what will come. But I do believe that if at some point Cuban government opens its doors again, and free trade begins, that you're going to have to look back at a lot of the past history in the United States and see how they were blending Cuban tobacco and looking at some of those old recipes.
Yeah, I think it can be done, out there. But you're also like General Cigar. If that happens, General Cigar is going to lose their trademark to all of those Cuban brands that they're the New World brands that they own. They'll lose Cohiba and they'll lose Partagas and they'll lose all of those trademarks that they have outside of that they have now in the United States
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in some countries, and they can't sell in some European countries because
I
uh,
think, but they could still do the same thing, though, Daniel. I think that I'm just speculating, right? We're just speculating, but I think that they could still do a thing where the Cohiba would be that one Cuban cigar that can't be sold in the United States, and then other brands could trickle in slowly.
from what
Um,
I remember from the lawsuit, because Habanos took took General Cigar to court here in the United States, and it was ruled that if the embargo's ever lifted, that General Cigar will have to relinquish the names of all the Cuban brands that they own.
yes, I read that
So
as well. I read that as well. But you know what the thing about this lawsuit is? It's been going on for over 20 years. And every decade or so, the conditions and the terms change. The claims that are made change, and they go through a different process every single time to come to the same conclusion, which is we're going to agree to disagree because General Cigar doesn't want to give up the brands. They feel that they pursued these brands ethically. I would say for the most part they did, with the maybe with the exception of Cohiba, which is the one at the forefront, right? The major issue. And but like you look at the Partagas, that it seemed like a legal sale to me. It seems perfectly legal to me. I just think that Cuba doesn't want to see it that way because they nationalized these brands, and that's where you're going to have an impasse. You know.
so if you were president of the United States,
Hmm.
would you would you partially lift some of the embargoes off Cuba for, say, the cigars, say some of the agricultural stuff?
Yeah, I would. I would kind of sort of do what Obama did, right, with that in regards to that. But honestly, I'm American president. I'm not looking to reward Cuba with any kind of flow of cash. I'm looking to keep them. I'm sorry to say this, but this is just talking realistically. I'm looking to keep them crippled and irrelevant. Sad to say, I'd probably be like JFK, and you know, I'm gonna sign this bill, but can you secure,
Every
five
can you
thousand?
can you go buy all the Monte Cristos in the DMV area for me,
Take them
please?
all,
Take them all.
please. But I mean, it's hard because as a cigar smoker, you would see things one way, and as a politician, as a president especially, you're looking at the fact that they're a communist country, they're a communist nation, and can't ignore that, who they're in bed with, who they have financial ties to. And I just don't want to, I wouldn't want to be that president that opens up the revenue stream for them in that manner. But yeah, I'd go send my guy to get all of the Monte Cristos. Bring them
I,
all.
I have thought about that, and I thought, just based on the agricultural side, not on anything else, just agricultural side. But
Yeah,
part of me also has the same feel as you, as a communist nation out there. Yeah, I want to see them crippled. I would like to
yeah,
see a free democracy. I'd like to see the people have their rights restored
yeah.
out to that before making any decision. But also the cigar smokers in me wants to be greedy and go, but I want these available for everybody.
Yeah, I mean
But
that
now
that, that would be
knowing
unfair.
that China owns most of Habanos out there, technically you're not really providing any revenue stream to Cuba. You're providing it to China, which already gets most of our revenue. So
That's one way of looking at it. I mean,
yeah,
I still think that the Cuban government still benefits greatly from the deal, um, in one shape or form of another. But if anything, in through the solidarity of, of the business that they have with China and their communist ties. But again, pushing all of that aside, I would love it if we could live in a kumbaya world where it would go back to 1955 when Cuba was allowing people like, you know, Davidoff and makers of that kind to have cigar factories and to distribute and, make Cuban cigars available to the masses. But believe it or not, as much as people think that, at least for Americans, right? I'm speaking as an American. A lot of people think that Americans were smoking a lot of Cuban cigars when they were legal in the United States,
they
but,
weren't.
but they weren't. They really weren't. As a matter of fact, the import shipments were decreasing by the tonnage every year uh, leading up to the embargo, and so you had a lot of people smoking Cuban tobacco, yes, but not Cuban made cigars. So that was the big difference. We as Americans, we were in love with Cuban tobacco, but not necessarily Cuban cigars.
So let me ask you something. Why haven't some of these brands out there, you know, gone back in for exclusive Cuban manufactured cigars for their like European market out there? That is a big that is still to this day, a huge Cuban, there are huge Cubans people
Yeah,
in Europe. But going back, like Davidoff finally pulled out in the mid '80s from there, but nobody's gone back in. Why do you think that is?
I think I think it really stems from the political unrest and the political climate, right? Because you you have certain laws that prohibit you as an American manufacturer, but if you're a European manufacturer, then it's a little different. And that's why you will have German-made cigars using with mixed with Cuban tobacco, and other countries that have access to it. Because let's just face it, they can't meet the demand. Most of the Cuban tobacco stays in house; it doesn't leave, and that's what was happening basically with a Davidoff, where he's buying all of this Cuban tobacco and he's cornering a good amount of it. So I think the Cuban government looks at it as, we need all of it. We can't afford to have distributors here and there buying Cuban tobacco. But despite that, you have some avenues where people do get a hold of some primo Cuban tobacco, and it happens. I think there's been a couple of cigars that have been released over the last few years that have been rumored to have Cuban tobacco. I think you might know some of them. And I rarely like to say which ones they are because everyone makes a mad dash. Well, I'm not because they listen to me, but because it's out there in the world. And they will hunt these cigars down and then they're out of stock. And I can't find them.
Well, like Ish with Banff, he has his uh, uh, BTC, better than Cuban, which has
Mhm.
Cuban filler in it, and he's open about that. He just can't market that in America that it has
Yeah.
that, but he sells it in America.
Yeah. And
Again,
that's
and
a
that
boutique.
and yeah,
Yeah.
it's out there. Marifeld has his own line that uses Cuban tobacco, and I'm sure that exclusive. I'm for certain there that somebody like Fuente has Cuban tobacco and stuff that he sells in Europe
Oh yeah.
out there.
I think they get a hold of some of it. I just don't think it's to the degree that it used to be with when
No, I
Davidoff was
just don't think
there.
that market. I don't think the
Yeah.
market there's available. But I'm sure
Yeah.
if you went to the tobacco auction, it's there. It's available.
Yeah, and like what you speak of right now, you'll find some of that going on the Canary Islands. If you go as a tourist and you go into some of their shops, they'll have some of these type of cigars that are blended with Cuban tobacco and that offer a very rare treat because you just don't see Cuban tobacco
Look, I
blended.
would really like to have a Cuban cigar that performed well. Is what I'd like to have. I'd like to have one that didn't fall apart on me, that didn't unravel on me, that was actually smokable. I would like that, and I would like to have one of the manufacturers out there be able to manufacture that and make it available for people to purchase. I'd
Yeah.
like that because I think it would be very good, and it would really give people an essence of what comes out of Cuba instead of terrible QC.
Yes, I think so. And that's a dream I think for most of us hardcore cigar smokers to have an experience like that. For me, I would be just happy with what was going on in the 1920s with the high level of quality tobacco that they were getting from Cuba and, just offering it up very cheaply to the American public. I think that would be a dream to me. But, you know, a Cuban cigar as well. Like, look, some lines of Cuban lines are exceptional, right? I think I had a Ramon Ayones about a few months ago, aged it for 3 years, and it was a powerhouse cigar, fresh, and it was still strong after 3 years, but it was smooth and it was just everything you'd want out of a Cuban cigar. And if only we could have that, available to the masses, it would be great.
Yeah. And I think some people get the idea behind some of it with some of the brands out there when it's expressed as Cuban-esque. And
Yeah.
based on that, out there, have you had the Bandolero from Alfonso?
I haven't had the bandolero. No, I haven't had that one.
So that was a
I've been
cigar when I
meaning to try
smoked
that.
it. So
You
when I
recommended
smoked,
it to me.
I
Yeah.
did. So I didn't understand the cigar when I smoked it.
Hmm.
And after talking with Oliver from United Cigars, who gave me the backstory on it, that this was Alfonso's tribute to the tobacco bandits that would go to Cuba, cut crops down, and then take them back to Costa Rica and manufacture counterfeit Cubans with Cuban tobacco. And this was his tribute to them with this blend that he produced. Um, and and then the cigar made sense to me because now I had an idea because I was trying to figure out the cigar where I'm like, okay, this is Cuban-esque, but there's just something about the cigar I don't understand. And that's where the stories, and I think in cigars, play a huge part in the enjoyability factor. I mean, when you say I enjoyed the cigar, did you enjoy the smoke of the cigar? Did you enjoy knowing the story behind it? And I think that
Yes.
plays just for me, that plays just as much of an important part in my enjoyability factor as was the smoke itself good. Is me
Yes.
understanding the history, the story behind the creation.
Yes. I mean, I think that's and at the core, that's what I strive to express in my content is that type of enjoyment in the history and the things you can pick up from the process for the cigar being made. All those little things that you mentioned that kind of just keep you interested. And as you're going along smoking the cigar, and you might pick up on some of these things, not just flavor, but the additional history.
So, what's your thinking with the rise now? A lot in uh, Costa Rica, and in what they're doing with bringing in more manufacturers, the more growing, utilizing high altitude tobacco out there. What's your thought behind that?
I mean, I did a big historical video on Costa Rica and some of the highlighted one particular manufacturer out there, and they yeah, I did, and it was relevant to the story. But Costa Rica really doesn't have that deep of a history with cigar making.
No,
Tobacco.
it
No,
was
no, it
within the
doesn't.
last 20 years.
Yeah, it's within the last
They're
20 years.
trying. They're trying.
They're
They're trying to
trying,
expand that.
but they do have some early history of some particular tobaccos that they grew at those high altitudes, and there were specific spots that they had identified in Costa Rica that grew the finest tobacco leaf, in their opinion, and that at the time could be a potential replacement for Cuban tobacco. At the time, um, what they've done over the years, I mean, the one thing that I come away with is that it is very expensive to do business in Costa Rica. Very expensive. So you've got to have deep pockets. And unless the government's going to, and I don't know what the situation is with the government over there, but they're very anti smoking as it is. But when it comes to making money off of tobacco fields, well, hey, you know, I think they're open to that. But I don't know what it's like. I mean, cost wise, it's expensive. Um, Jesus Martinez of Martinez Cigars says they used to buy Costa Rican tobacco. They experimented it with a little bit, but prices went up. It got really pricey. They experimented with Peruvian tobacco. Same thing. Peruvian tobacco went up in price, got really expensive. Peruvian tobacco has had a bit of a comeback recently as well, recent years with the Volute and a, a whole bunch of people using
Yeah,
a little bit of Peruvian.
Rojas is one of those guys that's big on using Peruvian in his blends. And I think a lot of it is that soil's very salty because most of
Yeah,
those tobacco fields are located near the coast. But
yeah,
the one thing
yeah.
that's interesting about Peruvian tobacco for a lot of people is most of it there's no irrigation because
Yes.
the the tobacco farms are located near the coast, and it's irrigated by the mist coming in off of the sea. So you get a saltier tasting tobacco because of
Yeah.
that. But they don't use any river water irrigation on that.
Yeah, they've got a lot of advantages because there are less insects and pests at the higher altitudes. There's still some that people will say there are none, but there are some. It's just a lot less, so your tobacco is less prone to disease, and that's an added advantage. You don't have to use, if any, kind of what do you call that again? Not for the bugs, the spray. You don't
Pesticides.
have pesticides. Yes, you don't have to use much pesticide, if any.
Mm,
Flooding, you have less of a concern for flooding, the way that the
flooding.
water runs down and
Mm,
everything. The drainage is
most.
great. Yeah,
Well, you see, when I worked with Reynolds Tobacco, and now our American farmers that grew the organic tobacco, no
classic.
pesticides. Now they would do 2 or 3 rows of tobacco and then do a row of sunflowers, then 2 or 3 rows, and did that because they used the natural pesticide, which was the sunflowers attracted the bugs that would eat the bugs that attack the tobacco plants. So
Yeah,
you're and it served as a dual purpose crop because now you're growing tobacco and sunflower seeds.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was I found that interesting, and the quality of that tobacco was fascinating. Inspecting a lot of that tobacco, it's just how hardy that the leaf was, and it was you could just look at that leaf and you'd spread that leaf out, and it was just thick and dense, and you're just like that's like okay,
yeah,
that's a good leaf, but and then I start thinking if you're trying to roll a cigar with this, that's tough. That's tough because of how thick that leaf is.
yeah.
How the what would be required to go into having to get that leaf to a point where it would be workable. Seems like it would be a lot of work.
A lot of work, a lot of work, and over the course of history, you have found cigar makers do a lot of different things to cut costs and put product out on the market quicker. That's why Candela, the green cigars, were so popular for so long, because it was easy to make a crop of these cigars quickly, get the leaf to where you wanted it to be, so that you could roll a cigar and put it out on the market ASAP. And you know, every region has its challenges, right? Uh, they just, I believe, Plasencia family just used Ometepe tobacco for wrapper leaf. Supposedly, they're the first ones to ever do it. And what it took for them to get to the point where they could find Ometepe tobacco suitable enough for
For
wrapper leaf,
wrapper leaf.
I'm sure they went through a lot to get to that point. And it's not a cheap cigar at all. Bit overpriced in my opinion, but people that want to try it are going to try it because it's rare. It's a first. It's like when they came out with the Dominican wrapper, and no one thought it could be done. The wrapper leaf was of poor quality in the Dominican Republic, and they had no hopes and aspirations for ever producing a wrapper leaf. Same thing happened in Puerto Rico to a lesser extent, but you see where we're at with the Dominican Republic, and so many Dominican puros, and you know, I'm just, cigar makers can be quite a creative bunch, and they can also be very resilient. And when they want to do something, they do it. You mentioned Davidoff earlier. Well, when Davidoff looked at the Yamasa region in Dominican Republic, and they looked at it, I think we've talked about this in the past, it was just like kind of swampland, kind of muddy, but you know, they saw something in the soil that was unique and that could produce a very unique type of tobacco in the Dominican Republic. And now these cigars, I mean, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to I've only had one or two of the Yamasa, and I've had some stuff from the Yamasa region. Amazing, amazing tobacco. Yeah.
That brings me out to the next point there. You know, these next generation of makers out there, coming from the kids of some of these legends out there and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think or feel is going to continue to grow with what we're seeing out there, where you see Ho Chi's son, JM, who's who's fantastic. You know, him and his dad did a collab. You know, each released one in their own interpretation, and JM blew his dad, who's a legend, out of the water. Out there, Alec Cuevas, who is just channeling in three generations of geniuses in his family to put out what was probably should have been cigar of the year out there. You see that as a trend that's going to continue?
I do. I do think it's a trend that's going to continue. I think a lot of what goes into cigar making has a lot to do with family ties and family relationships, or just pure friendships between families, right? So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think it's going to continue. I think eventually it's not going to be a trend. It's going to be part of the norm. Because, you know why I say this? Because I saw it in when I'm combing through the tobacco journals and the historical almanacs for tobacco in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. One theme, one thread keeps popping up, and that is family. And you keep seeing where one particular family, one of the sons or one of the brothers goes off and he starts his own business, and it becomes something else, and they just branch out, and there's collaborations. And this is something that has been going on in cigar history since the beginning, since going back to when the Spaniards were in control of the Cuban market and had a monopoly. It was still very family based, who you knew. Uh, and that doesn't mean that newcomers can't come in and do their thing. That's always going to be a possibility. It's going to always be something that they could do. but I think that it's going to be a norm. Uh, you know, these legends that we have, they're not going to be around forever, right? So they have to pass the torch to someone.
I agree. I agree. What has been one of your what has been one of those treats this year for you that you've been able to smoke and it kind of took you by surprise?
Uh, well, the first one that I have to mention because we touched on it was the Altaceas by the Partagas's family. You know, I think that one was really surprising to me, really surprising, and it was a great welcome surprise to have that kind of cigar on the market with the history attached to it as well.
Boy, when I booked him as a guest, you were the first person I told
Yeah, I
because
remember.
I fit of everybody I know. You were the one person I immediately thought of that was like, dude, this is who I booked for my show. That would be equally as geeked as I was. That I got somebody from a legendary family who's 60 years later trying to revitalize the family name and out there in manufacturing cigars, not family, like his family since they left Cuba has been involved in the tobacco trade.
Yep.
Most tobacco that is sold on the open market goes through his family, so out of their business in Spain. So the fact that he said, I want to bring back the family name into manufacturing cigars out there, and I
Yeah.
just I totally geeked out.
Yeah, he totally indulged our geekiness too.
Oh yeah, man! I was just
That was
there.
fun.
You're in the chat. I ask a nerdy question, and then here you are in the chat asking a nerdy question, and
Yeah,
I'm like, I
yeah,
think you and I are the only two that are actually like soaking in like what's actually happening here.
yeah. It was a pretty big deal, and when you scored that interview, I said, "Wow, incredible! This is going to be." I to myself, I said, I really hope a lot of people tune in to Daniel's all the time, but especially for this particular guest. And I was just amazed that he, indulged every aspect of our geekiness, and, and he was so, yeah,
When the show ended, I sat there talking to him for another hour after the show
wow,
ended. It was just nonstop. Like he sent me a box. Like I thought he was just going to send me one or two just for the show, and he sent me a box.
wow,
And I opened
classic,
that box, and like even with the cellophane, I smelled that tobacco, and I was just like, oh my goodness, it
yeah,
smells fantastic. I took one out of the cellophane, and I was just like,
it's just,
this is gonna be good. I mean, it
it's really
really
good.
had that fresh barniness out of that just cellophane, and I was just like, that smells so good.
And it's a beautiful looking cigar too. So apart from the fact that it backs it backs up with quality, but looking at it, aesthetically, it's aesthetically pleasing. It's a really smooth looking wrapper. It's just something you would expect, not quite on the Nelson Alfonso level, but a step below in terms of the aesthetic qualities. I don't know what their packaging is like, obviously, but in just looking at the cigar, I looked at it and I felt it and I said, feels good in the hand. I got a good feeling about this cigar. And sure enough, when I started smoking it, I just couldn't. I'm telling you, as soon as I got up I did a review on it. As soon as I finished the review, I go online and try and buy more, and they're all sold out.
Boy, I gotta say, Willie did a fantastic job on that blend. From El Titan de Bronze, like
Yeah,
he nailed it. It's just kind of like he told. I mean, he said it. He told Willie exactly what he was looking for, and Willie gave him three different blends, and he couldn't pick one. He had a hard time picking one because they all fit what he was looking for in the
yeah,
cigar.
yeah. I remember, it's So I smoked a serie de, uh, probably a few weeks before I smoked that cigar. So I still had it pretty fresh in my mind what it tastes like. And obviously, it's not what used to be. It's, current stuff. And I just thought it was on par with a Cuban cigar in terms of excellence. And I thought to myself, forget Cubanesque. This is just a really, really
It's a
good
really good
cigar.
cigar. Like,
You can add that to it that it's Cubanesque, and one might say that that makes it more appealing, especially for people that are looking for that. But even if you're not looking for that, right, and you just want a really good cigar that you're not gonna have to spend $20 to $40 on, this is your cigar.
it's one of those cigars that it has found its way into the rotation like
Oh
all the
yeah,
time. Like
yeah.
I honestly could make that an everyday smoke.
Yeah,
Honestly, I could.
I could as well see myself smoking one of those every day. There's just a nice tranquil feeling that I felt that you feel when you smoke a really really good cigar afterwards. That it kind of just I say afterwards because I'm from Brooklyn, right? So I get if you don't understand what I'm saying at times, you can ask me to clarify my English. So I got the deep Brooklyn accent sometimes, but afterwards you feel like this tranquil feeling after a really good cigar, and it's just a nice feeling that comes over you, nice body high if you want to call it that. And yeah, that's exactly how I felt after that cigar. I was so pleased.
Yeah, it's such a good stick. That was like it was one of those ones. When he reached out to me, and I was like, does this guy know who I am? No way. But he reached out to me. He knew who I was. He's like, I've watched some of your shows and what you do. He goes, I got a cigar that I'm going to be releasing. I'd love to come on your show and talk. I'm like, yeah, but you don't. You kidding me? If I had somebody even booked, I would bump them for you.
Yes. Even if it was honestly, even if it was me and you called me up, I'd be like, definitely, man. Don't worry about it. Dump me any day for this guest because I want to watch this interview.
Yeah, it was. But I thought of you immediately after I booked him. I'm like, dude, there's only one person that was going to appreciate this guest as much as me, and it was you. And then I had to tell somebody, and you're like the first person I told that
You
I
know,
had to.
yeah,
I had to. I was like, he's the only one that's going to appreciate this as
I
much as me.
certainly did. I was so excited. I mean, I set my alarm clock and everything for that one. That was a great interview. And if anybody that's watching this right now hasn't seen it, they should definitely go back and to the catalog and watch this because not only did you ask excellent questions as you always do, Daniel, on your shows, but he was just an engaging guest, and all the history that trickled down with it. Man, you asked me biggest surprise, and I gave you that cigar. The other surprise for me was a vintage cigar that I smoked that was almost 100 years old and smoked beautifully as if it was a modern day, almost a modern day cigar. It it wasn't. It was originally wrapped in a like an aluminum foil of kind of tin foil they used to wrap it in, and it came in a tin box, and so it was well preserved. And it was from Ohio, and it was Cuban tobacco, binder wrapper unknown, more than likely Sumatran, and it really surprised me because it just wasn't like your typical vintage cigar, and the fact that it was 100 years old and it had such robust flavor, it really blew my mind, and it really just it made it so much more fun to geek out on it because I felt like I was actually experiencing what someone in 1921 would have been experiencing, and the cigar was also a lot larger for a Vitola of that time, so that also played a part. Like the Vitola felt like your modern day Vitola, right? Like you asked me about the progression of the modern day cigar today, what we smoke today, and the sizes of the cigars that we smoke today play a big role in it because uh, cigars weren't that big. in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. And if you want to go further, in the 60s and the 70s, the Panatelas and the Londres Vitola were your main Vitola sizes, the Perfectos. So the modern day cigar also evolved from the American appetite for something bigger. You know, we
So,
want bigger TVs, we want bigger cars, we wanted bigger cigars.
so this rustic cigar here comes from Ohio, Pennsylvania area. This was is manufactured by an Amish community in this box press,
Are you trying to impress me?
handmade box presses. All
If
right,
you're trying to impress me, it's working.
all right. They're all here. They make closed foot,
Close foot, the traditional close foot style.
traditional closed foot. This is all. This is all Pennsylvania, Ohio tobacco. I don't know
That
what kind it is, but it's there and it's manufactured. And I had a friend who was rolling through Amish country, and they had these. And he goes, "Oh, I didn't know you guys sell cigars." And they told him we make them. And so he
yes,
bought a box of them for $60, 20 cigars for $60
great deal.
from there. Now I've not smoked it yet, but because he goes, "How'd you get that box pressing?" The guy took him to the back and showed him the handmade presses
Yes, yes,
that they all make that they make, and they're curing barns. I think that at least something in that's fire cured because I can smell the smokiness
yeah,
on that. So, and they go through and they do that. He saw the aging field or the aging barn on there, the curing barn out there, and they basically manufacture to order.
yeah. I mean that's part of their tradition and their cigar culture out there in Ohio, especially Pennsylvania. Uh, Long famous for its Conestoga Stogie, the original cigar that the settlers were buying, smoking, and trading with on the road. And it was crude looking, it was rustic, but it was in its day, it was a cheap, poor quality cigar. Yes, but it evolved to something else when the Vitola size was pretty much crafted using Cuban tobacco and other tobaccos within the United States that were at this point much better, you know, and that stalk leaf cut broadleaf, which we generally see it as a dark on a dark wrapper, right? Dark Connecticut broadleaf wrapper, but in their times it wasn't necessarily a Maduro type broadleaf. It was a lighter shade. It was what they called Connecticut shade broadleaf.
Mm.
And that was something that was used. I'm going to say that the Connecticut shade broadleaf was probably used in the 20s and the 30s, up until the yeah about 20s and the 30s, and if you look at it, it looks like a natural cigar. It looks like natural leaf, but it's actually broadleaf.
Wow.
And you know, someone did um, bring that back from the dead. Uh, Tatuaje, Pete Johnson,
Oh, really?
in the early 2000s, I think 2003, 2004, he introduced a cigar that was a pure Connecticut broadleaf. Filler, binder, wrapper, all broadleaf. And it wasn't a Maduro broadleaf, it was a natural looking shade of broadleaf. He called it El Criollito or Criollita, something like that. And it was a very interesting cigar. I managed to get a hold of that cigar, and man, I mean, potent cigar, but
So, what do you
very
think?
interesting.
So, how do you feel like with Drew Estate up there in the Connecticut Valley taking like Nicaraguan Criollo and growing it up in the Connecticut Valley? You know, a tobacco that requires a lot of heat,
Yeah,
a lot of sunlight to grow. I mean, the H99, for those of you watching, that's what the H99 is.
Yeah, the hybrid.
The hybrid.
Yeah. Look, I've been hearing so many accounts of so many different experiments over the years, and some of these experiments date back to the 70s. Okay, so uh, some of the crazy stuff that I read about that cigar makers tried in the 1960s and 70s after the embargo to cut corners and to stay in business, and the tobaccos that they were employing in their blends. I mean, it goes back to that. I mean, it goes back to the work that General Cigars did with the experimentation and the experimentation fields that they had. Some might say it's blasphemy. Connecticut farmers will say it's blasphemy. But if it's successful, I don't think you're going to hear too many complaints, because when Cuba, out of all countries, had to switch over their wrapper leaf in the 2000s as well because of the blue mold and the rot and stuff, and they went to a hybrid. You know, people were. Even my grandpa said, cigars were not the same. Cuban cigars changed. So you want to talk again about that change from the past cigar to the modern? It happened on a global scale. It wasn't just Nicaragua, American market, European market. It was happening in Cuba. And when they went to that wrapper leaf, a lot of people said, no, this isn't satisfactory. This isn't what we're used to. But guess what? There was no other alternative in that instance. So we had to get used to it. And used to it, we did get to some extent, because people continued buying Cuban cigars. The legendary status continued quite a bit for a while. But yeah, I'm not against it. I'm not against the experiments. I got some friends out here in New Jersey. They've got farms in the Dominican Republic, and they're growing a crop of tobacco in New Jersey. They're growing, I don't know if it's Corojo or Criollo, but they're growing it in New Jersey, and they're introducing it in about a year. They've already harvested the crop. They're going off of historical accounts of when there was an experiment, a college experiment or a government experiment to grow tobacco in New Jersey in the 1970s. And it was a one-time thing, and it yielded a good crop, but they never followed up on it. So now you got these Jersey folks, they're Cuban expats, and a few of them are Dominican, and they're recreating that. They're going back to the area where they felt it could be grown, and they're trying it out. And I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. I'd like to see what comes of it. Proof is in the pudding, as they say.
It is. Now, is there a tobacco out there you would like to try that you've never been able to smoke?
Uh, a tobacco that I'd like to try. Well, you know, I've had a little bit of that Italian tobacco in the CAO Italia, and I think they've used it in one other blend. But I would really like to one day take a trip to Italy, just to see Italy, and go to the tobacco field. That it's a small area, not far from where they grow the famous tomatoes, and try some of the tobacco that's coming out of that little section that has been growing since the 1960s, under originally a government pilot, I believe a government pilot experiment, Cuban seed, and it's supposed to be tremendously good, but it's a small crop. I would love to try that one day.
Have you tried the mafioso from Banff?
No, I haven't. What's in that?
It's well, other than the wrapper, it's in every binder and fillers, all Italian tobacco. As Ish will tell you, the Italians can't grow wrapper tobacco to save their life. But It's the binder and filler are all Italian tobacco in it, and it's called the Mafioso. You know, he's one of those guys. You know, he is the Blood of Vlad, which uses Romanian tobacco in it.
Okay.
So I'd tell you try it out. It's a really good cigar.
Mafioso.
Mafioso.
That sounds interesting. Most people think of Italian cigars. They think of the what are those the long skinny cigars? Oh, I'm not. I know this cigar. I love this cigar. It's the Italian Toscano,
Mm-hmm.
and most people think of that as your, the epitome of your Italian cigar, Italian classic, and it comes in a lot of variations. What if you took one of those type of wrappers, which are a Kentucky hybrid? Some of it is grown in Italy, fire cured, and you use some of that Italian tobacco in it. I don't know what kind of binder you use, but you can go anyway.
Mine is the Muerte Roja. Is my one tobacco I'd love to try. The Red Death. So if you watched Indiana Jones when he's running through the market in Marrakesh,
Yes.
and he passes the guy who has tobacco hanging from the rafter, and then that big bowl of red spices. That
Okay.
is
Yeah, I
the
remember that.
tobacco. Yes.
That's it.
So that is the tobacco. It is grown. It's grown on the shores of Spain and in Morocco.
Now
There.
that's short filler, right?
I don't know. It's a long tobacco. I've never smoked it, but it got its name because one, it grows in very iron rich soil there on off the coast of Spain and off the coast of Morocco, and it has been said it got its name because it has been known to kill a man. It the spice the heavy spice factor in it will choke a man to death.
Ooh. Well,
And that's
see,
the one tobacco I'd love to try. Is the spice factor in that so great that literally, you know, it would choke
it
me.
could be. It could be. It could be. I mean, I've had tobacco that was aged with pimientos, right? Spicy peppers, and I remember that being such a spicy cigar that the edges of my lips
Or burning.
turned. They were burning and they were starting to turn a little reddish. And as I would puff on, the wrapper, of course, had it as well. And it was an experience. And I thought to myself, wow, burning aside, I really enjoyed this. This was kind of cool.
That's the
So
one,
that,
and that's the
yeah.
one I'd love to try. Ah, you know, I was like, because I saw that, watching one day, and I was watching Indiana Jones, and there he is in Marrakesh running through the open air market, and he passes a booth, and it's got tobacco hanging. It's got tobacco hanging over it, and I'm like,
Hmm.
what is that tobacco he's got there? And so I did my research, and I found out it's called Muerte Roja,
Ah,
and I'm like, okay, read this. So I started looking at it, go, okay. It grows in iron. It grows in the iron-rich soil along the coastline in Spain and Morocco. Um, it's a naturally growing tobacco that grows there, that they harvest. It gets no water, and it's exposed to, that hot, hot, hot sun of the Mediterranean on it, and it has a very heavy spice. I'm like, I got to try that, but
that sounds really interesting.
nobody makes it, and you can't find it anywhere. And really, the only way you're going to find it is if you actually go to the open air market in Marrakesh. Is the only place you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be a little perilous as well. It could be a little dangerous, but you'd have to take your six shooter like Indiana had. You know,
But it's one I'd love to try out there.
that
I,
is. I would have never thought of that. But that just goes to show you how our appreciation of tobaccos goes, where we And I call us adventurous tobacco smokers, right? Adventurous cigar smokers, because you're willing to take a chance and try some different tobacco from a different area that you never knew. And that's another theme that comes up in history, mind you, where people argue about the different tobaccos across the world, and they dispute the merits, and the negatives of all of these different tobaccos, and they actually put it into text, and they publish it, and they let the world know what they think of these different tobacco growing regions and what they have to offer. And during the early 19th century, you had a lot of people that were just looking for an edge. They were willing to try. They knew Cuba was the motherland, as we know now. They knew Cuba was it. But what else can we do? Where else can we grow the tobacco? What other regions can we exploit? you know?
And I think that's
yeah.
where you have a guy like Ish who comes into play, who says, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to go to Romania and get tobacco in Romania. I'm going to go to Ireland and I'm going to take traditional pipe tobacco, Irish pipe tobacco, and I'm going to put it into a cigar.
Yeah.
I think that there's that innovativeness that isn't out there, but you have one person out there who's doing it, who's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to travel the globe. Wherever they grow tobacco, I'm going to go and I'm going to find it. I'm going to try it, and I'm going to try and I'm going to blend it into something however I can.
Yeah.
Because that was my thing when I had Ish on and I interviewed him. I go, why Romania? He goes, because I heard that somebody was growing tobacco there, so I had to go and check it out myself. As like, he's like, it's small because it's growing in a cold, wet, damp environment. It's not hot in Romania. It's cold, it's wet, and so it doesn't grow very big, but it packs a big punch to it because it has to survive that harsh climate.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like it harkens back to the CAO model. And when they kind of put all these cigars using different tobaccos, right? And whether they were successful or not, the point is that it made us aware of Italian tobacco, Brazilian tobacco, Panamanian tobacco, and all of those other kind of tobaccos that, they're probably making a cigar line out of some of these tobaccos is not sustainable, because you're not going to be able to get, the crops are not going to be what you have in more developed tobacco growing nations, but it's still interesting to try,
It is. I have now, when Rick Rodriguez, who used to be the lead blender at CAO, when I met him, when he started his own company after he mutually parted ways. We'll just go mutually.
Yeah.
That's
when
probably
they wouldn't let him do what he wanted.
Yes, that's probably what the email that went out to everybody. We've all gotten those emails at work that I've mutually agreed to part way. Yeah. After it started up West Tampa. So I supported Rick when he was going through all the change to try and, help him out, because he's always been a cool guy to me. And so when and he came over and he gave me a hug, he was like, I got a gift for you as a thank you. And I was like, you don't have to give me anything. This is what I do. I want to help promote you. And so he hands me this cigar. The cellophane is so dark on it. I can't even see what it is. And I'm like, oh, wow. I was like, thank you. He goes, this is an original run from 2017 of the Brasilia. Or the Amazon basin. Sorry, of the Amazon basin.
So I had that, and it was well,
And so I haven't smoked it. No, I've smoked the Amazon basin, but this is from the original manufacturing in 2017 of it. And I'm like, I have it, or I sit there and I stare, I'm like, I should smoke it. But then part of me is like, if I smoke it, this is like a once in a lifetime cigar.
So I will ask, how long have you had it aged?
2 years. And so, now we're pushing 7 years on that cigar since it was manufactured.
I think it might be time. I mean, unless you want to just keep it as for it to become a true vintage cigar smoke, right?
Well, I have it in my collection humidor is where I have it at the moment. You know, where
Okay.
I keep my collection pieces, stuff I'm not going to smoke because it's either super rare or I only got one, and if you smoke it, it's gone. But it's a nice talking piece.
Yeah, I found that after about 4 years or so, it started. I would say 4 or 5 years. It started to lose some of that robust flavor, right? Um, I found it best at the 3 to 4 year mark.
Okay.
That specific one, the 2017, which I bought many of, and I remember it fondly. And I kept a few. I smoked my last one, I think, in 2020. So it was 3 years old at that point. And I know, and I had another one left over, which I smoked, I believe, in 22, and it was good, but much more enjoyable at the that 3 year mark. But look, at this point, it's going to be a vintage piece that you're going to talk about for years to come, and you're going
It
to have in your
is. It's
collection.
one that I probably, it's not there. I also have uh, the 2006 Opus X Double Oscuro, which is a
Ooh,
uh, uh,
Daniel.
which is a Marifel Cameroon Oscuro wrapper, Fuente Marifel Dominican Cameroon Oscuro binder, and then Dominican filler in there. Now I bought those back in 2006 when they came out, and now those cigars in 2006 were $35 a piece then, and that was a lot of money for a cigar in
Yeah.
2006.
Oh, yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
bought five. I bought five of them, and to be honest with everybody, I forgot I had them. I was going through. I was sorting through my 12 Tupperdoors. Well, I bought 12 of them, and I
Yeah.
labeled them based upon what the wrapper was. So that way, if I'm feeling like a certain wrapper, I could just get it. And I saw my, well, where did this come from? And so I had three left, and so I smoked one, and
Okay.
unfortunately, it did not age well. It ended up tasting like cardboard.
Yeah. So that I get asked that a lot about, like the vintage sticks, like what they taste like, especially when we're talking about 20 plus years, right? And we're not even talking 20 years here, but almost. I just think that a lot of it has to do with the origin of the tobacco, how we were talking about the different regions, right? And I have found that Dominican tobacco does not age
It
as
does
well.
not. It does not age as well.
Even Fuentes, which is usually stronger, more, offers that denser smoke and everything, and it has that uh, feel of this could be a potentially good aging cigar. But like I did the video a long time ago on aging Padron cigars, and I don't think that Padron cigars, even though they're Nicaraguan, don't age as well either. Could it be because he already ages his tobaccos extremely long before rolling? Maybe. Also, could be just the blend in
Yeah,
question.
could be. I
Some,
mean,
yeah,
I agree on that. But I definitely agree with Nicaragua or Dominican tobaccos do not age well at all.
they
You
don't.
you you hit that 7 to 8 year mark, and you can really see the drop off in it. And this one, and here we're going with a cigar that's almost 20 years old, and
Yeah.
it did not age well at all. I have also have in there the 2008 Davidoff Presidente, which was $100 cigar. I have one of those in my collection pieces. I had two, and they were gifted to me. They only made 1,000 of them, and it was gifted to me. I smoked one like the day I got it, and then I've kept this other one in the collection, and it was a fantastic smoke. I wouldn't pay $100 for it, but again, you're talking about early 2000s where if a cigar cost you more than $9 then that was high end. because
Yeah.
you didn't drop a whole lot. I think the 1926 Padrones, the Corona size on those were $12, and that was a lot of money. And that was back in the early 2000s. Now, good luck trying to find one for less than $25.
I'm planning on doing a video actually on cigar prices throughout history, and that's one of the things that's going to come up is how a $35 cigar then
Oh yeah.
to what it would be now and things of that nature and everything that goes into it. I found out there's an additional calculation
Well,
for
I've
figuring
seen
out.
people who, if I went on to the cigar trade site, some of the cigar market trading places on there, and I've seen that just one of those double Oscuro Opus X's sell for $600 to $700 now,
Yeah.
just to buy one of them.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
yeah, you're
and
gonna pay a lot.
I've got two left. So,
You're gonna pay a lot for these vintage smokes, and trust me, I know because I got a lot of vintage cigars, and some of them are pretty pricey, and the expectations that go into them are very high when you're paying a lot of money for a cigar, and you just have to readjust your expectations when you're smoking something that old, especially if we're talking about a particular tobacco that doesn't age well. You know, Cuban cigars age well. Say what you want about them, but most of them age well.
they age
Most
well.
they age
I
pretty
think a
well.
lot of it has to do with the aging process, or the aging and curing process that they use. Has a
Yeah,
lot to do with the viability of the cigar retaining its flavor and potency throughout the years as it goes.
yeah,
But again, it's a natural product, so at a certain point, that it's just going to start breaking down. It's going to start breaking down, and then you add that heat to it, and the chemical composition of how that tobacco burns is going to completely change that dynamic of the cigar from where it was at.
yeah. And then then you get those surprises, right? And you hear about these guys. They buy a box of cigars at auction or whatever, and you smoke one, and it's beautiful. It's
Oh yeah.
beautiful. I mean, that is ideal, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, there's that guy. There's that really rich guy who has a YouTube channel where he goes and just spends a lot of money on stuff, and like he buys a lot of vintage cigars, and
I think I know
then
what you're talking about.
he upsets everybody because he had bought the very last box of Monte Cristos that came off the production line before the embargo, the very last one that was stamped.
Yeah,
It's once in a lifetime, and he cracked the box, and him and his buddy smoked it, and he made it clear, and it tasted like shit. And then used the comments in there of everybody who are just upset that he did that, and I'm like, I'd do it too if I had that kind of money to drop $900,000 on a box of cigars. You're damn right. I'm gonna pop that. I'm gonna invite all my friends over, and we're all gonna crack it, and we're all gonna smoke it. You're damn right.
yeah.
I'm gonna do that
I
because
mean,
they're meant to be
yeah,
smoked.
they're meant to be smoked, and I get that. I think some of the backlash also comes from I would probably say, and if people are writing in comments and I'm not making them out, it's because I can't see without my
Oh
glasses.
no, you're good, man. You're good. You're good.
But
I've been asking some of the questions that have popped up on there, and
but
you've been answering
some
them.
Oh, okay. Some of the backlash also comes from being an ill-educated consumer. Just okay, fine. I've got $1 million as pocket change, but at the same time, as a cigar smoker, don't just be that guy that buys something just to buy it, to be the cool guy who bought it without really knowing what you're getting. If you're buying it as an investment, that's a whole nother story, right? That's a different type of cigar smoker, maybe, but for people like us that want to smoke it and enjoy it, the backlash would be like, dude, like, I guess 900,000, that's a lot to drop on a box of cigars, right? Especially if they're not going to be that good. But if they're,
But you don't. How are you gonna know unless you try?
you don't know. You don't know, and that's just how it is. I'm fortunate that I get a lot of my vintage cigars from the vintage cigar store. And this guy, the owner George, he I'm like his you could say I don't want to say I'm guinea pig because he smokes them too and he tries them out, but I'm sort of like a taster, right? And
Yeah.
and this is a tough job, Daniel. This
No,
is
I oh yes, this is a tough job. When I get
tough job.
packages in from manufacturers on it, I'm like, oh my god, I gotta smoke this now and give
No,
them my thoughts and notes on this. Oh, it's a hard job.
it's
It's
a
a
hard
hard
job.
job.
But I get some of these cigars. They're from the 1930s or 40s, pre-embargoes, and some of them they don't measure up. And I have to be honest, and I say, look, don't blame yourself. You weren't holding this cigar for 80 years. This cigar went through many hands, probably, and kept probably under many different conditions. You just don't know what you're getting. Sometimes you get a guarantee. This was in the cellar of a rich English lord for the last 100 years, and then there's an estate authentication and all of that. Great. I mean, that's fine. I read a story recently from the 1920s of a rich English lord that kept cases and cases of Cuban tobacco cigars in his wine cellar, 55-degree temperature, 55 relative humidity. That was his. That's what he would keep them at before he smoked them for 6 months. That was his tradition. If you happen to come across an auction for some of his cigars, that's what you're going to be getting. Probably a very dry cigar. Excuse me. It would have been tasty to him, but maybe not to you.
Oh, what a great man! I loved having you on. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, man. And uh, you're one of my favorite people out there who creates content. Links to everything Jose is down in the description. So go follow him. Go show him some love on YouTube. Go show him some love over on Instagram. I've made it easy for you guys to go find him and connect. If you got cigar stories, he will listen. And if you got questions about tobacco or vintage or history, he's the man right there. He's the guy I go to if I got questions. And
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on, man. It's an honor having you on.
Thank you for having me on, Daniel. As always, a privilege to be on here and an honor to share the stream with you and just talk. And as a guest here, you're doing an excellent job. As you know, you're always killing it. And I just want to thank you. And I just want to say, in 1914, the Vice President of the United States said, "What America really needs is a really good 5-cent cigar." And today, what we have the equivalent of is our great $10 to $12 cigars that are offering outstanding quality from many different regions. And I just want to say that we've come a long way in the cigar culture, and you've been a big part of it, Daniel. And I just want to say thank you again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you, and I always appreciate you having you on. And of course, you're always going to be one of those yearly guests I got to bring on once a year to catch up and nerd out with, because I don't get to do that often. But when I get to have my me shows, you're one of the guys that I'm like, I gotta have on.
And I got to say this one last thing. Please, everybody, check out my next video that I'm going to release on the Roy Tan cigar. El Roy Tan was one of America's leading clear Havana cigars in the 1930s. Man to man, smoke a Roy Tan. That was the slogan. That was the advertising campaign. And I'm going to bringing you that history uh, in less than a week. Check it out. It's an interesting history on a very famous cigar that, by the way, was Elvis Presley's favorite cigar brand.
Can't wait for that one. That's awesome. Man, appreciate you coming on
All right, man,
again.
brother.
I can't thank you enough for all that you do and the
Thank you for having
history
me,
and
man.
the hours of enjoyment I get from listening to your history lessons while I'm on the road slaving away for the man. It provides me with hours of entertainment, and I appreciate that. Next week, um, Maddie Santiago Peterson will be my guest. She goes by AKA Cigar Royal. Uh, Content creator, also is an educator. She's done a lot for women smokers out there, putting on educational classes, teaching women about tobacco, the history, and really getting women involved in the culture. She will be my guest next week. I'm really looking forward to having her on. Great person. So that's it for this week, guys. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Take care. Be safe out there. Don't do anything Jose and I wouldn't do because we're sweet and innocent boys. And I will catch you all later. See you next week, everybody.